India loves its SUVs, particularly its mid-size SUVs, a segment that has only grown in popularity and size and become one of the most dominant and largest growing segments in the market. And the reason behind it is the car next to me, the Hyundai Creta. Since its launch in 2015 has gone on to sell over 9.5 lakh units. It's almost close to 1 million, and that makes the Hyundai Creta not only one of Hyundai's best-selling cars, but one of India's best-selling cars. In fact, Hyundai didn't even really need to launch this new updated version that you see right next to me, because as of 2023, the Creta continued to be one of the top 10 best-selling cars in the country, and as of early Jan 2024, there still is a backlog of about 23,000 units that Hyundai has yet to deliver to its customers. So demand remains stronger than ever, and yet here we are with what can easily qualify as an all-new Creta, because so extensive are the changes to this particular model that you see right next to me. We're talking about a new powertrain, we're talking about new looks, a new paint scheme, and of course some very, very major changes to its interiors. So let's see what the 2024 Hyundai Creta is all about.
In profile, the Creta remains unchanged. And yet, it's a lot more noticeable than before thanks to extensive changes to its front and rear end. Clean and arrow straight lines define both ends, with a single daytime LED bar extending to the opposite sides of the front section of the car and a radiator grille running parallel to it. A quad beam headlamp cavity setup on either end makes for a more symmetrical and more business-like front end.
So the most significant visual changes to the exteriors are up front. You've got this quad beam LED headlamp unit housed here, and of course you have these very straight daytime running lamps. I've turned on the indicator so you can see the turn indicator has a signature and a flow to it. Then of course you've got this massive radiator grille, which of course is also straight, so it's all very fuss-free. The lines are not curving, they're not pointing, they're just always parallel to the ground, and the same kind of theme continues up here with the bonnet, because you've got these clean-cut straight lines up here, which is very traditional SUV, and we've kind of seen SUV design now go back to its more sort of retro theme. So that's kind of what they've also gone with here. So it's very unambiguous in its SUV-ness as such.
Things are just as straightforward at the back, with a single light bar connecting the two headlamps. It's cleaner, if a bit less imaginative. That, along with the new 17-inch dual-tone alloys, a reshaped bash plate and rear bumper, just about sum up the exterior changes, which is just as well because the real party is on the inside.
Now, the most extensive changes are, of course, on the inside. The Creta has always been a very well-equipped car, and that's a major reason behind its success, just a whole variety of features. But now it's a lot cleaner, and of course, the biggest talking point is this dual screen setup. You've got the real estate divided between 10.25 inches for the infotainment and 10.25 inches for the digital instrument cluster. Before we get into anything, I want to talk about this one particular feature that you're really not likely to find in any other car, and that is a kind of a karaoke mode. So if you look at the screen, you essentially see that the lyrics are sort of written out, and that's because you get a 1-year free subscription of the JioSaavn app, which can just stream music through an inbuilt chip. So for long road trips, if you want to sing along, and if you doing a family trip, then it's a nifty little feature to have, and it wasn't necessarily something that people were crying out for, but now that it's there, I think it's very interesting. So with that novelty having been dealt with, let me take you through the other features.
The party piece, of course, is the new dual screen setup with two 10.25-inch screens sharing real estate.
Single dual screen unit, of course, is the main highlight, but there are other points of interest. I really like this leather wrapped gear knob, which feels very tactile. Of course, this is the top end 7-speed DCT. it feels really nice, and it's kind of a premium feature, you know, that even some premium cars no longer have. Of course, you've got your wireless charging dock, you've got ventilated seats for both the front passenger and the driver. In an attempt to sort of manage costs, they have dispensed with any use of leather up here, and they've gone for this rubberized sort of grippy surface. The good thing is that it doesn't reflect as brightly onto the windscreen, so the driver has a clearer view. It's also easier to maintain, it's very easy to clean, and it doesn't feel low on quality. Yes, I feel like maybe the finish could be just a tad better. It's not as seamless as I'd like it to be, but it's still a very high quality interior here. But the big point of interest, of course, is the variety of ADAS functions that we get. So a grand total of 19 level 2 ADAS functions, which includes lane departure assist, lane departure warning, blind spot warning. You've got a camera and radar based system up front and a radar based system at the back. So you can actually use cruise control for engaging, let's say, a lane departure or a vehicle departure system. So if the car in front of you starts to move, then it'll automatically start to move as well.
Still, there are some glaring omissions, chief of which is the absence of wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto.
So what I also really like is, of course, the camera function. You get this 360-degree view with a 3D model of the car, and all you have to do is just sort of gently run your finger across to whichever angle you would want. You get this top-down view that's permanent, but you can control the orientation like this, and you kind of have a clear view of the obstructions facing you, and that's always a welcome feature. Then, of course, you go into settings and you can control the extent of ADAS. For example, the front collision warnings, etc. And that's pretty much it.
Well, not quite. You also get a panoramic sunroof with a voice activation system recognizing 12 local languages, a host of BlueLink features, and, as a standard feature across all models, 6 airbags. But that's not all the Creta has up its sleeve. It's also the most powerful car in its segment.
Instead of the same 1.4 litre turbo petrol that you got in the past, you now get a 1.5 litre turbo petrol that makes 20 additional horsepower. And that's because Hyundai basically wants to tell the market that, look, we're the market leaders when it comes to this segment, so we need to be the most powerful. And therefore, that 20 additional horsepower means that it now puts out 158 horsepower along with 250 Newton meters of torque. And that makes it more powerful than the Škoda Kushaq and the VW Taygun. In terms of a popularity contest, there really isn't one, because the Creta wins. Across the country, its buyers see it as a symbol of power and prestige and a variety of things that only an SUV can really denote. And in that, the Creta seems to have hit the right notes with its proportions, with its design, with its features, and a whole bunch of other things. But now you can add performance to that list, because this is quite a sprightly motor. The 7-speed dual clutch transmission is responsive. Of course, upshifts are fairly quick and crisp, but I wouldn't call them entirely seamless. I would say that in that regard, Škoda and VW still have the edge. So when you floor it, you do get this noise, but it then picks up very fast, and of course the downshifts are just as quick. You also have this sport mode where the dials kind of just go red, and the difference isn't that strong, but of course it holds on to revs a little longer, as any sport mode does, so you get a bit more spirited performance. Now this is of course the top end version, so as a result it is going to be more expensive and therefore not the highest selling version. But this is undoubtedly the Creta at its finest, loaded with features, brimming with power, plenty of poise given the way it moves. Engine noise could have been a little reduced, could have been a little more insulated. With this improved structural integrity, which thankfully or unfortunately we can't put to the test, and we'll only know when Hyundai enrolls this car for the Bharat NCAP, and I strongly suspect it will, because it's been talking about safety a lot. It's talked about how the chassis has been strengthened in a way, and of course Hyundai has made 6 airbags mandatory in all its vehicles. It's a standard feature now since October. So they are gunning for that high safety rating, something that's been a bit of a chink in their armor. While it hasn't really affected Hyundai's sales, the Indian consumer is now getting more and more conscious about safety, and they really don't want to be caught on the back foot. So this is pretty impressive. I've got a big bus in front of me and I've set the cruise control to close to 60 kilometers per hour, but all the braking and the throttle modulation is now entirely being done by the ADAS system. It's not something we haven't seen before, but it's always good to see it happen in a confident and sort of well-engineered manner, because a lot of ADAS functions have popped up in cars in this particular range, and sometimes there is a bit of hesitation from the car, especially when it's coming to a halt at a traffic stop. So now, setting the cruise control to 70, I'm going to let the car do most of the work. So lane keep assist is active, so it can adjust the steering a little bit, and even though the cruise control is set to a higher speed, it's observing the bus ahead and modulating the throttle accordingly, right? So we've got an animal crossing, very common. We've got a speed bump ahead. Mind you, I'm not putting the brakes at all. I just touched it, so it's accelerating on its own as well. I've not applied throttle, set the speed limit to fairly low, 30 kilometers per hour. But even that, it's modulating entirely on its own. I think it's only with speed breakers that you kind of need to bring it right down to a crawl, especially if there's no obstruction up ahead, because it's not able to effectively detect that. But it's still going to slow down. You just have to kind of tap the brakes a little bit, which is really not asking for too much. But once again, speed limit set to 51, and we can already see it reading the environment up ahead and controlling the speed.
From tall boy to golden boy, Hyundai has come a long way with the new Creta. Decisive ADAS, more comfort, better safety means that the Creta has worked on its drawbacks and come out shining, possibly for another few years of market dominance. And while it continues to do that, we'll just bide our time and wait for the Creta EV.